Hey guys, welcome into Craze's Corner. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the later segment. We're going to be talking about some of the highest ranked fantasy football players and what should you do with them. Do you want to sell high? Can you keep them and expect them to lead you to a championship? We'll let you know later. We're going to break down some quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So make sure you guys stay tuned. But first, we're going to get into some news. The first news story: the Panthers have acquired C.J. Henderson in a deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Panthers acquired a fifth-round pick and C.J. Henderson for Dan Arnold and a third-round pick. Dan Arnold and a third-round pick, yeah. So fantasy implications, obviously, I think this is a big upgrade for Tommy Tremble, who is now the Panthers' number one tight end, the rookie they drafted in the third round. He scored on a run play last week, and I think that they're going to continue to implement him into the offense. For Dan Arnold, I don't think this really changes his stock much. He's going to be the number one tight end in Jacksonville. But he was the number one tight end in Carolina. It didn't really lead to much for him. But I think it's really good for the Panthers defense. They did lose J.C. Horn, who's now on IR with a broken foot. So he fills in nicely in that role. And then when J.C. Horn comes back, to have the ability to have Dante Jackson, J.C. Horn, and C.J. Henderson, who are all super young. I think it's going to be a great secondary for Carolina. The next injury update is James White. This is extremely unfortunate, but he did suffer a hip injury, and he is going to miss the entirety of the 2021 season. As a guy who doesn't really get much praise, he's done so much for the Patriots organization throughout Tom Brady's tenure, and even after. He's always been that reliable check-down guy, and he's one of the best at what he does. So this is extremely unfortunate to see. I've always been a huge fan of him, and I wish him a speedy recovery, and I hope to see him back next year. And the third story, this seems to be an annual thing, but Josh Gordon was reinstated by the NFL, and he has decided to sign with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's currently on their practice squad, but once he comes acclimated to the offense, he will be promoted. So what will we see out of Josh Gordon? Is Josh Gordon going to be the number two? I think he's got the talent to be the number two wide receiver in Kansas City, the third target behind obviously Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. But in that offense, they've been losing some games, so I think Josh Gordon can bring that big play upside. He was an amazing wide receiver with the Browns. Obviously, people forget how good he was. So I think this is good for the Chiefs, but we'll see. Do you guys think Josh Gordon can be fantasy relevant? Let us know using the MEedia app. The MEedia app is an amazing app. It's a virtual press conferencing app. There will be a new version releasing soon, so make sure you guys download it and keep checking the updates. It's going to be coming soon. I'm super excited about it, and I hope you guys check it out. It's really great for all your fantasy leagues. And now let's welcome in our guest. We have Will and Jeff again. Thanks for joining, guys.
What's happening? What's happening, Zach?
Not too much. We're going to be breaking down the highest, the fantasy players who have scored some of the most points at their position. And we're going to be letting you guys know, do you keep these guys? Do you try and trade them away while their value is at the highest? And can you expect these guys to lead you to a fantasy football championship? We're going to start off. We're going to go position by position. So we're going to start off with quarterbacks. The first quarterback was a guy who I was drafting in almost all of my leagues. I was super high on him. I knew he was going to throw a lot of touchdowns. And that's Tom Brady. He's currently the QB1. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. He is the QB1 ahead of Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, who did start off super hot. But he's been consistent with the touchdowns. He's had a lot of yards through 3 games, 1,000 yards through 3 games. He's been averaging over 100 yards per game, or 300 yards per game, which is amazing. And I knew that the upside there was there for the touchdowns, and he's got a really low floor because the Buccaneers still have an amazing offense. And their secondary has been struggling, so they have had to score points. And Tom Brady's been able to do that through Gronkowski and other guys. But I think this is probably as high as Tom Brady's value is going to be right now. So if you can capitalize on Tom Brady being the quarterback one, if you can get another really good quarterback as well as another asset to help win your team, that's something I'm definitely looking into. You were able to get him in 9th, 10th rounds of drafts where now you could trade Tom Brady, who I think will eventually he'll start to dial it back. They'll start to run the ball a little bit more throughout the course of the season. And I think that you can get good value in return. If you can get, yeah, I think you could probably get a guy like Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, that aspect, and get another good player in return. So if you can do that, I'm all for it. But if you can't, if you just trying to get rid of him to get rid of him, I wouldn't do that. I think he's still going to be a very fantasy relevant quarterback, and I think he'll finish in the top 5. But what about you guys? What's your take on Tom Brady going forward?
I've got him on one of my teams. Matter of fact, in the same league that I'm with Will in, which I'm currently pretty high up. Um, yeah, I'm hard pressed to kind of figure who I would actually trade him for, trying to get in return, other than somebody like Mahomes, maybe Aaron Rodgers. I'm a Russell Wilson fan. That's my guy. I don't know if I'm making that trade right now. Definitely would need another player. But I think Tom is going to continue to score. I mean, I think this might be at his ceiling, but I think his floor is not too, it's not like he's going to drop off and only score 1 touchdown a game. He's going to throw touchdowns. He's got that line with the secondary being, still kind of bad. We'll see if Richard Sherman is able to help. Tom's just going to throw the ball. That's what he does. That's what he's there. So that's why I'm kind of, if I can just be guaranteed 2 to 3 touchdowns a game, it seems like that's what he'll give me. I'm sticking with him. I mean, with Mike Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown when he comes back. And then I said at the beginning of the season, I think a full offseason with Gronk. Now you see what's happening. That's his safety blanket, and touchdown dependent, but the touchdowns are there because they're going to move the ball down the field. So I'm holding on to him. Unless Will wants to send me something crazy, I don't know.
Yeah, I think his value's higher in 6 point per touchdowns passing. Where if you're in a league where it's 4 point per passing touchdown, but 6 point for rushing touchdown for a quarterback, that's a league where I could transition to a Lamar Jackson. Because the 2 to 3 if you get 2 touchdowns on Tom Brady in a week where you could get a couple of rushing touchdowns on a Lamar, that can make the difference. And Tom Brady's playoff schedule isn't great. I know it's a little early to be looking at the playoff schedules because obviously things change. But if you think that your team's locked in to get to the playoffs, you're fully confident. They play the Saints, which would be first week of the playoffs if you're in a 10-man league or 12-man league where you have 6 teams that make the playoffs. And then they play the Panthers the week after that, which we all know the Panthers currently have the number 1 ranked defense in multiple defensive categories. In the final championship, if you're confident your team can make it through those 2 matchups, Tom Brady being average, you're probably going to win your league because they play the Jets championship weekend. So if you have Tom Brady on your roster and you made it to the championships, I would almost guarantee you're going to win due to the fact that he'll probably put up 50 points in the first half and then get benched. But what do you think about Tom Brady going forward, Will? Are you trying to sell? Are you keeping him?
I would probably try to sell, to be honest with you, because I think there's a lot of good quarterback play right now. Or bad defense. We can debate what that is. And especially if you're like in running back and someone's willing to give you a number 2 running back or number 1 running back for Tom Brady, I'm making that trade. I'll take that every day. I am a little worried about week 17 against the Jets. If Tampa Bay is locking things up, I don't put it by them to rest him, even if it's at halftime. And so we know that game looks like, that might be a 40-point game for Tom. I'm not sure.
I think
it depends on how the NFC South is going and how big of is it a must-win game, like home field advantage or something like that. That if they're doing well and they got things locked up, it makes me a little nervous with Tom Brady that week.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of similar to when they played Detroit last year. Tom Brady scored, I think it was 4 touchdowns in the first half, which is obviously enough to do good for fantasy football. And I think he'll start the first half because I don't see them having anything locked up. I think the Rams are still going to be really good throughout the season. So even if they're not competing for the division because the Panthers, for whatever reason, fall apart if Christian McCaffrey doesn't come back or whatever, I think that they will still be competing for that, so they'll have to play him for the first half. But that's definitely something to consider too, because if they get up a lot on the Jets, which no one's struggled to do so far, that you're not going to risk Tom Brady's injury for
Well,
nothing.
and the other thing you have to think too is the Jets, as bad as they are, Tampa Bay's defense makes more points than the offense now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it looks like a great matchup, probably is, but makes me a little nervous. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. Like the defense they can get pick sixes or they can get a bunch of picks and set Tom Brady up at the 20-yard line almost every drive.
Yeah.
And all he's got to do is throw a touchdown. So it's going to be a matchup where he does really good or he's going to do really bad.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to the next guy who did have a down week last week. But I still think he is one of the top quarterbacks, which is Kyler Murray. He's currently the QB3. He was the QB1 over the first 2 weeks. He's got 10 total touchdowns. 3 of those are coming on the ground. But he has thrown for 4 interceptions. He threw 2 in week 2, and he threw 1 last week against Jacksonville. He's got the rushing upside for sure. If you're in like I said, a 4-point per passing touchdown, 6-point for rushing touchdown, I think he's more valuable than some other guys. But I am worried a little bit about Kyler Murray going forward. I don't think any of us in here are the biggest believers in the Cardinals as a team. I think that Kyler Murray will still be fantasy relevant. I think he'll probably finish as a top 7 or 6 quarterback when it comes down to it at the end of the season. But if you can still get – I think it's probably – I would have sold high last week. But if you can still get good value for him, he's another guy who I would look to move on for. I'm not going to say I'm going to want to move on from all these guys, so don't worry, guys. There is some players that I'm going to say you can ride to a championship. I just don't think quarterback is necessarily that position. If you can get your depth at running back and wide receiver, I think that's much more important to a successful fantasy football run than a really good quarterback because injuries at those positions happen much more often. And if you have a guy if you have Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, guys who are in and out of the lineups, I think that having a really good running back to come in and substitute for him is more important than having a Kyler Murray or Tom Brady-esque player. So that's just my opinion. But what are you guys' thoughts on Kyler Murray going forward? I know you guys are probably also worried, but how worried are you, and are you looking to move on from him?
As long as he can run, it's hard for me to move Kyler Murray because it seems like there's gravy, right? He's going to get you some rushing yards, might get you a rushing TD, probably will get you a rushing TD, right? Mm-hmm. And he's going to put up good throwing yards, right? The back end of their schedule makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, but once the playoffs start, the Lions, the Colts defense could be 50-50 depending on how healthy they are. They're currently really banged up, and the Cowboys defense has been all right, but not great.
Yeah.
But before the playoffs, they definitely do. They have the Rams, the Bears, Panthers, 49ers,
San Francisco, Green Bay. I mean, it's they're entering the meat of their schedule, and so I think if you're going to sell him, you have to sell him now, because 4 weeks from now you may not be able to get as much as you could now. And the only thing is, to me, that either you have to have a good quarterback as your number 2 that you can live with, or you have to be getting a decent quarterback back.
Yeah,
because you're losing the mobility. You're losing those points that you get from him running. And to me, that's
which is really important for fantasy quarterbacks because obviously you get 0.1 points for every 10 rushing, or you get 0.1 points for every yard. So you get if he rushes for 10 yards, you get a point, whereas you don't get that much for passing, which does make a huge difference. And he has been rushing. He hasn't been rushing too much. He's got the touchdowns in there, but 31, 20, and 19 rushing yards. It's not amazing, but the touchdowns definitely do help. And we've seen in the red zone, if you guys have been watching, that Kyler Murray has been the red zone back. They'll bring in James Conner. They'll run the fake to James Conner, and he'll just run out the other side, and there's no one there. The only thing that does worry me about that is if I'm a defense, I would start to scheme against that because that's going to come. I'm much more worried about Kyler Murray coming off the edge than I am of James Conner. But we'll see if the defenses can adjust. So far, we haven't seen that. But then again, they played some below-average defenses. So what do you think, Jeff?
Well, that's the issue. The thing that, if I knew he was going to be healthy for the whole
Yeah.
season, then I'm keeping him. But that's the issue. He's got to go through this NFC West. I want to see what happens after this weekend, honestly. Them against the Rams. If Aaron Donald happens to get his hands on that guy, man, he always gets hurt at the wrong time. So that's why we're looking at playoffs down the line. Honestly, he may not even get that far. He always gets nicked up, and it causes an issue. So that's my whole thing. If he's healthy, he's hard to stop. As a Seattle Seahawks fan, I know that. But that's the problem. In one of these games, an NFC West game, eventually one of them, I think he's going to get nicked up, and it's going to affect his performance, kind of like it did last year. Started off hot, but once he got injured, things kind of slowed down a whole lot. So
I think it's something to monitor with his injury history. Being a Russian quarterback, the injuries are obviously more likely to happen because you're taking unnecessary hits sometimes. So that's something to monitor. We'll move on to the running backs here. The first guy I'm going to talk about is a guy who I think's kind of gone under the radar through the first 3 games. He's currently the running back 3. And I don't hear anyone talking about him as much as I think he should be. I think he deserves. DeAndre Swift for the Detroit Lions. He's had 33 attempts for 123 yards on the ground, which only equates to about 3.7 yards per carry, which isn't great. Their offensive line has been banged up to start the season, which also doesn't help. But he has had 23 targets, 19 receptions, 166 yards, which is a lot for a running back. That's a lot of targets. So I think that his role through the passing game is definitely important. We'll see going forward how much that actually continues. Obviously, Jamal Williams is getting the work, and the Lions don't have a great defense. So they've been playing from behind a lot. So I think he will continue to get the passing game work, which is something I don't think you can capitalize on DeAndre Swift's value right now because I don't think enough people are talking about him, and I think his RB3 is under the radar. So he's the guy I'm going to keep. I'm going to continue playing him because I think the passing work is going to come. He's got 2 touchdowns on the season so far. I think he had 20 points week 1, and then he went to 9 points, and then he went back up to 20. One thing to monitor, though, his week 1, he played 68% of snaps, and that has gone down each week till last week where he played 56% of the snaps. So that could be them getting Jamal Williams more involved. But on that 56% of the snaps, he still had his share of rushes, his share of receptions, and he had 20 points. So we'll see. I don't think you can capitalize on his value and get enough in return right now. So he's a guy I'm keeping. He's a guy I think that you can move forward with as your running back. I would be more comfortable with him as my running back 2 because I think he's still going to have some down weeks where Jamal Williams will get the touchdown or they'll just be so far behind that he'll get the targets, but sometimes they won't come down with them. But what do you guys think about DeAndre Swift going forward? Are you guys surprised that he is the RB3 right now?
I'm a little surprised, but then I also see how their game script is. You got Jared Goff, whoever's closest to him, that's who's going to get the ball. That's why you see it went from TJ Hawkinson to now DeAndre Swift. He's like, oh, you're right there and you're open. I can get you the ball. Because they really have no downfield threats. They're receivers, it's sporadic who the guy is going to be. So he goes to his faithful with, it's not Hawkinson, it's DeAndre Swift. So, as long as you're in a PPR league, definitely, he's definitely a guy that I'm actually targeting with some trades. But if you're in a standard league, I'm not really touching him because I think goal line even it's Jamal Williams that's getting the touches more so than DeAndre Swift. So, and he's on the Lions, so there's my thought behind that.
Only thing I'm going to add is their schedule gets tricky. Look, that game in Chicago this week. Chicago don't cut that grass short; they keep it long. It slows the running backs down. The Minnesota game will be tough. Division games always are. At Cincy, at the Rams, I mean, I don't really see a real good game that I'm really like hyped for him for with Jared Goff and the Lions until maybe week 8 with Philly. But I would, if he's my third running back or my second running back, I'm probably going to roll with him right now because whoever I get, who am I trading him for? So maybe somebody's okay. So somebody crazy enough to give up Dalvin Cook because like, oh, he's hurt. I don't know. At least Swift is playing. Is somebody? I'm trying to think. What can you get for Swift that's worth value that you would move him?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the problem I see right now, that he's gone so much under the radar that people don't realize how good he's been. So I don't think, like some of the other guys that have been on this list that have got the media attention, I don't think you can capitalize on him being the RB3 right now.
Yeah.
I put him on this list because I wanted to give the Swift owners confidence going forward that he's going to see the targets. That's going to make him a viable option to start each and every week going forward.
If I could get James Robinson for him, I would do it.
That is an interesting thing going forward. James Robinson or DeAndre Swift going forward. I would probably. That's tough because James Robinson's in a system with Urban Meyer that you can't trust Urban Meyer.
Right.
But if I had James Robinson, would I trade him for DeAndre Swift going forward? Probably not. I view them both kind of in the same tier as an RB2. I think Swift probably has the higher upside with the passing game. If you're in any type of PPR, so I might actually, if I have James Robinson and I'm in any type of PPR, I might actually flip him for DeAndre Swift.
I'll make that trade all day.
Exactly. That's why I think I am confident that he's going to see the targets. Obviously, Jamal Williams is going to get his, but in an offense where Jared Goff, the quarterback, who likes to check it down, I think both running backs will have value. I mean, as my RB2, Swift, I think his floor is probably around 9 points like he did in week 2, but as we've seen, the ceiling of 20 and even higher if you can get a couple touchdowns in a game. That's really what I'm looking for because my running back one, I want to have a big guy who's going to be consistent, 15-plus points a game. So I think that DeAndre Swift is what I'm looking for. But let's move on to the RB7, who is the running back 2 on his team. This is a guy who's always kind of gone under the radar in fantasy, and then he's gone off so far. Kareem Hunt has had 29 attempts, so a little less than DeAndre Swift, but he does have 165 yards on the ground, which equates to 5.7 yards per carry, which is really efficient. Obviously, the Browns do have an amazing offensive line. And DeAndre Swift had 23 targets. Kareem Hunt, we know, makes his bread in the passing game. And he's had a total of 11 targets through 3 games, which kind of surprised me that it was so low. He has, however, caught 10 of those for 104 yards. So he's been efficient when he has got the ball. He's managed to score 2 touchdowns so far. If you can capitalize on Kareem Hunt right now, I would do it. I would be comfortable with him as my running back 3 when bye weeks and stuff come around. But Kareem Hunt is not a guy I'm looking to start every week due to the fact he's not on the field enough, where I don't think his ceiling is quite as high as some of the other running backs. His snap percent at the highest so far this season was 47, and that was week 2. And his lowest was 38. And I personally can't feel comfortable starting a running back who's only on the field 40% of the time, because I think that's a recipe for disaster when it comes to bust potential. So I would move on from Kareem Hunt if you can. But if not, feel comfortable with him as your running back 3, possible flex depending on the matchup. But I think Chubb's still going to get his. So what do you guys think about Kareem Hunt? Are you excited about the points he's been scoring or nervous about the opportunities he's going to see going forward?
Baker, to me, Baker's like golf. Whoever's close to him is getting the ball, especially if he early in the game, if he's getting pressure, Baker starts going short, right? And then you look at the injuries of their wide receivers and just not able to help. Because look at Kareem in the last game, 6 receptions, right? I don't think that's coincidental. I think they lost Landry. Odell's still coming back. Now, the guy kind of intrigues me more on Cleveland long term is Felton. I think if the Browns start realizing how to use him,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he starts to eat into the running back catches
Which
because
takes away from Kareem Hunt more than it
it
does
takes
take
place
away.
from Kareem Hunt. So, you could kind of see, like, I think Kareem Hunt has a decent game this weekend with the Vikings. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both teams are going to be throwing the ball, and the running backs are both going to benefit from both teams. But you can kind of see Felton each week getting a little bit more. There's a little bit more confidence from the coaches in his ability. And so, yeah, if you could move Hunt right now for maybe a running back that's, maybe under the radar right now, a little bit underperforming, I would do it. Especially if you can find, like, look, if you don't have Chubb on your team, that to me, that's a great trade, is the owner who has Chubb and who can you get off their roster. Because it's like having Tony Pollard right now. I have Tony Pollard on most of my teams. The trade requests I get from the Zeke owners, who are now in a tied knots, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who the hell's going to play and who's going to perform better, right? So I think if you can, make the owner who owns Chubb in your league say, hey, do you want to handcuff these guys and this is what I need in return? Yeah, it could be a good pick.
I mean, I think if you can get like a guy, David Montgomery, I'd rather have Chase Edmonds going forward, Antonio Gibson, just some guys who I'd rather have over Hunt. Do you want to chime in here, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always the guy that goes for volume, whether it's carries or whether it's targets. But Kareem Hunt is the one guy to where I feel bad for him because in real football, to me, he's an RB1. He's kind of like he's trapped behind Chubb. The worst thing the Kansas City Chiefs could have ever done was let this guy go. He should still be their running back right now.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. He doesn't get the high amount of carries as an RB1, but it's what he does when he gets the ball in his hands. He has not. It's funny. You will have Chubb have more off weeks than Kareem Hunt.
Yeah,
as we just saw last week. So it's kind of difficult, man. And it's just like a Montgomery. I would see that. I could see trying to entice somebody to take Kareem Hunt over David Montgomery, but I would rather have Kareem Hunt than a lot of other RB2s like a Mike Davis, like a Miles Simon. This guy produces. That's the only thing. So it just depends on what name pops up right now. Even Javonte Williams with Denver, even though he's in the same boat with Melvin Gordon right now. But it's just some guys that drafted certain guys over him. He's way outperforming right now. So it's kind of like, what do you do? And I think Kevin Stefanski is going to keep them. Felton might go ahead and start siphoning off some carries or some targets, but this guy is entrenched in the game plan. So I don't think he's going to lose that much. But when he gets that ball in his hands, he always produces.
Well, and that's a great point, Jeff, because look at what Stefanski did in Minnesota with Cook and Madison. The offenses that he had in Minnesota were always two running backs, Latavius Murray, right, and Cook. So, I think the coach believes in the two running back, and I think he goes to the hot hand. And honestly, I think Hunt's the guy he leans on at the end of the games. I think as the season goes on, Hunt's the guy he's going to just be like, yeah, I need this guy on the field right now because he just does a little more for me.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, two running backs, when you introduce Felton into that mix, I think he will end up taking – if you're deep at running back and you can get – if you're deep at running back, you run up Javonte Williams. If you can get Javonte Williams and say you need a little wide receiver help and a wide receiver piece for Kareem Hunt, that's something I would definitely look into doing because I think as the season goes on, Javonte will keep getting better. Whereas I think Kareem Hunt will kind of be consistent. He'll score in between 5 to 20 points every week. I think his floor is around 5 points when you factor in the half-point PPR. All the rankings I have been using, QB, the wide receiver, running backs, and everything are going to be half-point PPR because that is my preferred way to play fantasy football. So if you're looking at the numbers and I'm saying, oh, this guy's the running back 3, but you play PPR and he's higher or lower or whatever, just remember I am using half-point PPR rankings when I go through these, but we're going to move on to the wide receivers now. We're going to talk about the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 2, and the wide receiver 5. So first up, the wide receiver 1 has been Cooper Kupp. 33 targets, 25 receptions, 367 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Him and Matthew Stafford have really looked amazing together. This is kind of something before the season started, Cooper Kupp had the touchdown upside that I didn't think Robert Woods had. We saw that before with Goff when Cooper Kupp had his amazing season where he finishes the wide receiver 6. So this was the upside that we knew was there. He also has had double-digit targets in each game. And in their second game of the season, he was actually on the field for 100% of the snaps. I think it was 90-something% week 1, and it was down to 83 last week. But he's always on the field, and he seems to always be open, and Matthew Stafford has proven he can find him. And there's enough offensive weapons on that team now with the emergence of Deshaun Jackson. Obviously, Robert Woods is still there. You can't really turn your coverage toward doubling Cooper Kupp. Then you're just going to get beat in other places. So you have to play 2 deep safety and hope for the best. But when you're playing zone, Cooper Kupp's extremely smart. He will get open. So that's something to monitor. I am fully confident moving forward with Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 1. Do I think he'll finish at the wide receiver 1? Probably not. Obviously, things happen. He's not going to have 2 touchdowns every game. But I think he's going to be great. Barring an injury to him or Matthew Stafford. I'm confident with Cooper Kupp moving forward. I think you can get great value for him in return right now. But unless, like I said, if you're super deep at wide receiver and you can trade Cooper Kupp into an RB1, for sure, go ahead. But I think you can move forward and ride Cooper Kupp to a fantasy football championship as long as the injuries don't happen. What do you think, Jeff?
I would hold on to him because unless you're going to trade him and get somebody like Devontae Adams or something like that, which could happen, it would have to be somebody that's just getting all of the targets, looking at the Rams offense, knowing that, if somebody is shadowing Kupp, that they do have Woods, they do have Deshaun Jackson, they'll have either Henderson or Sony Michel, and hell, Tyler Higbee as well. So there's a lot of mouths to feed there. It just happens to be that Cooper Kupp is the biggest mouth right now, but it's just wondering if he's going to continue to be that. I honestly think so. The kid, the way he runs routes, man, he's a great receiver. So, unless you're going to get one of those top guys like a Devontae Adams and hell, who else? I'm trying to think right now. Who else would warrant?
Would you take? I don't know. You could look. Obviously, you can look at the running backs as well. Would you rather have Cooper Kupp or Saquon Barkley going forward if you're a running back needy team?
I'd rather have Kupp because that offense is going to move. You don't know
exactly.
What
and then there's
offense, man.
There's names like Aaron Jones, Cooper Kupp, Austin Eckler. Like it depends on what you need. If you're super
Aaron
deep
Jones,
at wide receiver,
and that's it. If you're stacked with wide receivers and you need,
but if you're
higher end running back,
if you're
that type of trade.
If you're not stacked at wide receiver, I can't see moving on from Cooper Kupp.
Exactly.
Well, what do you think, Will? You riding with Cooper Kupp?
I let's be honest. I think if you're stacked at wide receivers, because you have Cooper Kupp. Because there's a clear number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football in football right now. Truth be told, it's him. We could debate who number 2 is, depending on the week and what the schedule looks like and all that. I think the first 3 weeks and watching you have to know they planned for him last Sunday, and he still had 9 receptions and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Who else are you covering? I would be like, hey, Robert Woods, if you beat me, you beat me.
Yeah.
Now, Deshaun Jackson, they get free, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they got over concerned with Kupp as the game went on.
Right.
But that was kind of a blown coverage, right? I don't know how Deshaun got that far behind. It wasn't like it was there was a man right on him and he made the catch. I mean, he had 5-6 yards
Yeah.
on that catch, right? So, and Matthew Stafford, as long as he don't hurt that hand, that throwing hand.
Yeah. McVay has all the pieces he's ever wanted in place.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
He knows what
their offense right
it's
now.
almost like he's playing Madden right now, where he knows, okay, I got this guy here, I know who to go to. So
Yeah, and I really like the way that their wide receivers complement each other. Robert Woods has been that solid guy, extremely smart, as well as Cooper Kupp. And then you have Deshaun Jackson, who's a burner. So I like the way that their offense is shaped. We're going to move on to the wide receiver 2 right now. So just put it in perspective, in half-point leagues, Cooper Kupp's around 78 points right now. The wide receiver 2 is around 66, and the wide receiver 3 is around 56. So Mike Williams is the wide receiver 2 in fantasy football right now. He has 31 targets, so 2 less than Cooper Kupp, but he's only caught 22. He's had 295 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's had more than 9 targets in each of his games. So are you excited about Mike Williams going forward? He's a guy where I would like to trade while his value is super high. I think he will have his ups and downs. He's struggled with injuries throughout his career. And he's never seemed to be able to put this full season together. I think Keenan Allen is still there. Jared Cook's going to see his. Austin Eckler's going to see his. So I think it depends on what you think this Chargers offense is going to be going forward. But I'm looking to trade Mike Williams for another wide receiver, or if you need running backs. But what do you think, Jeff? Are you rocking with Mike Williams going forward?
I'm rocking with Mike Williams, and if I was in a league with you, I would definitely trade for him because I told you guys on this show, Joe Lombardi is using him the same way he used Michael Thomas in New Orleans. That's why there's an uptick in targets. Now, as long as he's able to stay healthy, I see this production continuing to go forward throughout the season. The health thing is the thing that scares me to death. But I think he's turning a corner as far as being the receiver that he had the potential for, that everybody would see in flashes years prior. I think now it's actually coming together because you still got to watch out for Keenan Allen. It's still a threat over there. You still got to watch out for Eckler. You still got to watch out for Jared Cook. It's just I think that now quarterback's his name is escaping my mind right now.
Herbert.
I think he is. Those two are actually developing a really solid rapport and chemistry right now. Keenan Allen's still going to get his. He's reminding me. It's almost reminding me of the Rams situation. Keenan Allen is reminding me of Robert Woods right now. Faithful, always puts up numbers, but there's something about something that's newly found with the way that they're using Mike Williams. He's catching balls in a regular fashion. He's always gotten hurt before because he's always had to make some sort of acrobatic catch and then fall down and hurt a hip or something like that. Now he's catching balls in stride. He's catching the balls the same way Michael Thomas did before he ended up becoming hurt. So that's why if it continues to go that way, I think he's going to continue to produce.
Now, what are your thoughts on Mike Williams going forward, Will?
It's just the injuries. I mean, there's always been the talent. I mean, come on, this guy's always a talent. It's honestly the whole wide receiver core with the Chargers makes you worry. Like, okay, we kind of seen this before, big games, and then the injury bug just comes and bites them. And so it'll be interesting to see if they've changed their training. Maybe they're better prepared this year. I don't know. But Mike Williams makes me nervous, and I'll be honest with you, if I could trade him and get a good number 2 running back, and it always goes back to what your roster looked like. But if you had a couple other guys that, the production's not that big of a slip and they seem healthier, and now I could trade for a good running back, yeah, I might do it. But I will say that Charger schedule is sweet, man. That second half of their season, there's nobody that should scare them, and they should be putting up yards. They should be throwing the ball. It should be Air Coryell again, right? It should just be lighting it up with Dan Fouts and just going 30, 40 yards downfield and just punishing the D-backs on these other teams.
Yeah, one thing I will say before we move on, it also depends on who's in your leagues for what kind of value you're going to get, because obviously everyone values players different. So when we say if you can get good value, it doesn't mean just try and trade them away. We still believe in a lot of these players. We think they're
Yeah.
going to be good. But obviously Jeff's a lot higher on Mike Williams than I am. So if what Mike Williams is my wide receiver 2 or 3, and I can flip him to Jeff for something that I feel is better for my team, that's a situation. The guys that we are saying, like I'm saying, I would like to sell high on Mike Williams. If I can't capitalize on him being the wide receiver 2 right now, I'm quite happy with him as my wide receiver 2. If I have another solid wide receiver there, so don't just trade these players just for the sake of trading them. Only trade them if you can get good value. We're going to move on to a guy who I'm questionable about. I'm talking about Jamar Chase, who's currently the wide receiver 5. He's the only player to ever start their career off with a 30-plus yard touchdown in each of his first 3 games. Obviously, he's been reconnected with Joe Burrow, but like the other 2 on this team are on this list so far when we come to wide receivers. The first one, 33 targets, Mike Williams, 31. The thing that concerns me about Jamar Chase is he's only had 16 targets through 3 games so far. He's only caught 11 of those for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is what has him at the wide receiver 5 right now, is the touchdowns. Just looking at the discrepancy between PPR and non-PPR leagues is insane. In PPR, he's currently 11, but in standard, he's 4. Half-point PPR, he's 5. So that's something to monitor as well, because he isn't seeing the targets that some of these other guys are. So if you can capitalize on the touchdowns right now, so what I would do. Tyler Boyd, he's going to see his targets. T. Higgins is currently out. So T. Higgins did not play last week, and he only had 5 targets. Imagine when T. Higgins comes back, that's even less targets for Jamar Chase. I think he's still got the big play upside. He's averaging like 20 yards per catch right now, which is insane. He can obviously, I think he can keep up that number throughout the season, but he's not a guy that I'm going to be fully confident playing every week because of the low target, the low volume. But he's a big play guy, and if he catches those long touchdowns, you're going to be quite happy. What are you guys doing with Jamar Chase moving forward? Are you guys a little nervous as well with the low targets, or?
This is one guy I'm trading. I'm trading as quick as I can while it's hot, because it's Cincinnati. Schedule's not the easiest. It's not hard, but it's not the easiest, right? And how does this guy? He's not getting enough targets now. He's only, his catch radius. What was he? It was 50% last week, right? I think it was 4 targets and two completions. So what happens when snow comes in, or it's 32 degrees, or it's 22 degrees? That makes me nervous about like this current Cincinnati offense. Honestly, if I could get Mixon for him, I might do it, because I think Cincinnati becomes more ground dependent and short passing game as the season goes on. And I think Chase has great potential. 2 years from now, he's probably a clear number 1.
In a dynasty league, I'd sure.
Dynasty. But if you're playing for this year, look, no one drafted Jamar Chase thinking he was going to be their number 1. So if you draft him, he's on your roster, you're lucky. So the question is, have you fallen in love, or are you willing to say, hey, let me sell this guy while I can get a couple of, I can probably get a number 3 wide receiver for him and a running back, honestly.
Yeah, the hype is there.
Yeah,
the hype is there right now, and people are in love with Jamar Chase. So you could definitely capitalize in almost any league on Jamar Chase right now. What are you doing, Jeff? You going to go against me and Will here, or?
Well, I have to apologize to him. I guess he can catch a pro football. I was wondering if maybe he was setting everybody up during preseason, dropping balls, because he hasn't seemed like he's really dropped any yet. I actually have him on one of my teams, but I got him as like a wide receiver 4. So I can go ahead and hold on to him, trying to really see where I have some other holes that I might need to fill. But that's the one thing, is just I'm wondering how you guys are going one way, looking at the targets dropping. I'm wondering if him and Joe Burrow are going to continue to build a stronger chemistry, especially with T. Higgins being out, to where maybe there will be an uptick in targets. That's what I'm looking at. I was trying to see how many times Joe Burrow actually is going to throw in a game versus handing it off to Mixon.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of hard. It depends what you would get back or what you would target in a trade. It's like, would I trade Jamar Chase for Calvin Ridley?
Yes.
Thinking that
I would
Calvin
much
Ridley
rather have Calvin
targets
Ridley.
are going to start going up. It's hard to make that argument right now, the way that the Falcons are playing and where, the position is on the rankings. So I know that Calvin Ridley is going to get the targets, but is he necessarily going to get the touchdowns? So he's not. I don't put Jamar Chase in a boom or bust yet because he hasn't really busted. He's always,
Yeah, he scored a touchdown in each of his games so far, a 30-plus yard touchdound.
Right.
And that's something where I don't think that is sustainable.
Again, yeah, it's kind of like if you need a kind of higher end running back that's not necessarily a high end, number or wide or running back one, and I'm trying to think of a running back that might be, it's anybody I guess that would come behind Najee Harris.
Would you rather have Nick Chubb going forward or Jamar Chase?
I'd make that trade in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
I'd rather have Nick Chubb.
I'd rather have Nick Chubb.
I'd rather have Nick Chubb as well.
I'd rather have DeAndre Swift. I'd take DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think the value is there, and there's a lot of people right now who are going to pay up for Jamar Chase for the new rookie hotness.
I would consider Melvin Gordon for him, to be honest with you.
I would consider Javonte Williams. I'm not super excited for Gordon going forward. I think Williams will still take the backfield, but we're going to move on to the tight end here. I'm only going to talk about one tight end. Currently, the tight end 2. I was looking at the tight ends, and there wasn't really too many surprises within the top 5 or 10. There's the guys that you knew were going to be there, but the tight end 2, I think, is kind of surprising to some people. He's had 4 more targets than Jamar Chase, so he's got 20 targets on the season. He's got 5 more receptions than Jamar Chase with 16, 184 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is Gronkowski with the Buccaneers. He's been great so far. The first 2 weeks, he had 2 touchdowns in each game. He's had over 5 targets in each game so far. He's currently a little banged up, which is concerning. Being where he's at in his career, he's already retired once, and he struggled with injuries before, so hopefully he can come back. So I'm not sure right now if you can capitalize on any of his value. I think you can feel comfortable with him moving forward, especially this is a guy who I would love if I have Tom Brady and Gronkowski on a team. That's something I would love to see because when Tom Brady throws a touchdown, there's a good chance it's going to go to Gronk. So you're going to get the stack there. If you can get really good return on Gronkowski right now, go for it. But I don't think you can get anything, especially with him being a little banged up going into the Patriots game. But if he goes off against the Patriots, and he's fully healthy, I would move Gronkowski to upgrade wide receivers, running backs, because I think tight ends there's more value that you can get, and I think Gronkowski will he's not going to see 2 touchdowns a game, which is what has made him so far the tight end 2. But you guys think Gronkowski can still get that average a touchdown a game to make you?
Look at play the Cowboys, whose defense is suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Played Atlanta, who has no defense. Then he played the Rams, and it all went away.
Yeah, he did get hurt in that game too, which drastically dropped his snap count. I think his snap count went down almost 15% because he was out for the middle of the game there.
And then you look at the playoffs, right? Okay, there's somebody you could probably say maybe not play in that Jets game if he's beat up. And you're saying
he's someone that I think will probably get hurt throughout the season, and they're going to need him to be healthy. So
they'll rest him.
I guess if you can capitalize on the value right now, go for it. But I don't think you can get much in return for Gronkowski. So he's a guy I'm just kind of holding on to, starting him when you can. Jeff, you want to jump in? Any thoughts on Gronk?
it's a tricky situation because of the position as well. There's not a lot of, if you have a dedicated tight end position in your league and on your roster, it's like you trade him. Who else are you going to put in? Unless you have one of the big 5 or 4, everybody else is a crapshoot right now. You're kind of looking at Gronkowski the same way you're looking at a Dalton Schultz, except for that there is a that Tom is going to be looking for Gronkowski in certain situations. Everybody else, the other names that I've mentioned, Cole Kmet and, with the Bears, hasn't done anything, it's like, who else would you get?
One name I would
Williams with Arizona, and then he doesn't do anything the next game. So
one name I would like to bring up within the tight end industry right now is George Kittle. I think he's currently outside the top 10, or he's pretty close to being outside the top 10 for tight ends. So if you can trade Gronk for Kittle, I'm much more excited about Kittle going forward, especially because he's going to see the targets. So Kittle's a guy I think you might be able to buy low on. I know we're not really talking about people buy low on right now, but if you can flip Gronk for George Kittle, I'd do that in a heartbeat. So it really depends on it depends on the Kittle owner and how worried they are, because he hasn't really performed so far. But we're going to move on now to the social media post of the week. We're going to be talking about Richard Sherman, who just started up his podcast, and then he somehow signs with a team just after he starts up his podcast to bring in some attention. He has signed a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers. Tom Brady was obviously recruiting him. You can see his tweet there saying, "I'm back." It was him saying, "I'm signing." He did release the news on his podcast, which is great advertisement for him. Obviously, he's had some off-field questions that we actually talked about last week in the show, where we weren't really sure if the team was going to take that on, and what is the NFL going to do about it. Currently, he's practiced so far, so the NFL doesn't seem to be taking the suspension road. I haven't heard anything about that, so it looks like he might actually be able to play for the Bucs. I think he's probably lost a step from what he was, but he can still be that veteran leader in the Bucs secondary, which they really don't have, and they struggled with injuries at the corner, which was already the weakest point on the defense. So I think it's a good signing for them. It's gonna see the NFL, because there was he tried to not break into the house and everything that happened in the offseason. Obviously, he was going through some stuff, and he's going through the rehabilitation process now. You guys, any thoughts on the Richard Sherman signing?
He may have lost a step, but he's probably still better than a lot of the guys that are actually starting in the league. There's probably about 2 on Seattle's defense that he could probably start over right now. So I think it's a great move by Tampa. And there's something about sometimes having those guys that are a little bit older that have that veteran leadership. Sometimes they get with a team like that, and again, they're just rejuvenated because of the situation that they're in. So I think it was a great signing.
Yeah, that's an all-in move. That's an all-in move by Tampa. That's we think we can win it all this year. And don't be. I don't think we should be shocked that they did it the week after they played the Rams.
Yep, that's true.
All right, you get a guy with NFC West experience, knows the NFC West very well. I think we thought the Rams would maybe win the game, but the Rams dominated that game.
Yeah,
they did.
Dominated that game. And so I'm not surprised that Tampa Bay is reacting the way they are, trying to figure out how to respond to what happened to them on the field. And honestly, it's funny it's not being talked about more. And I know that what happened with Richard Sherman is his own journey this season is a big issue. But no one's talking about, is this a sign of panic from Tampa Bay a little bit? Like we got destroyed, and if we match up with these guys again in Los Angeles in that stadium for the NFC Championship game, I think they're worried.
Their secondary's been exposed throughout the season so far.
Yeah.
Dallas did it. Obviously, we saw the Rams do it. And even the Falcons were able to put up points against the
Yeah.
defense,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
they scored 17 against the Giants, but they were able to put up way more against the Buccaneers, which is something that's really concerning. Obviously, their front seven is great. They have some really good linebackers. The defensive line is good. But the secondary, dealing with those injuries right now, is definitely their weakest link. And when you're going up against a team right now, the top teams in the league, you got the Rams, amazing through the air. Even a team like the Chiefs, you're not going to be able to beat the Chiefs if you can't stop the pass.
Right.
Sure, you can stop the run all you want, but that's not what the Chiefs do well. That's not what the Rams do well right now.
Right.
Without Cam Akers and everything, like, the Buccaneers are going to need to fix this moving forward, because if they're going to continue to get exposed through the air, they're going to be in a lot of close games.
And think about too, like, Richard Sherman, honestly, maybe one of the top 5 defensive backs in the history of the league. You know, especially the way he was drafted. He wasn't a top draft pick. I mean, he was coming out of Stanford, and people thought he was a second-tier defensive back, right?
Fifth round.
But I wonder, does he match up well with the modern NFL wide receiver that's smaller and quicker?
No, I think he'll excel in zone coverage.
Exactly.
I think that to play more zone coverage with the addition of Sherman, because Sherman can't keep up with the wide receivers, as you're saying. So it's going to have to come to the defense scheming to play to their secondary strength, which for Sherman is going to be zone coverage, because he's still super smart. He's got the ability to read the quarterback and make those plays when he's got a situation where if he's running with a guy, he's not going to be able to run with a Deshaun Jackson anymore, because Deshaun Jackson still hasn't lost that step that we saw there. He's not going to be able to keep up with Tyreek Hill. We saw that problem.
I don't think he covered.
Now, he would be with the Robert Woods. He would be.
I think Robert Woods would outrun him.
I don't know.
Like,
I think you're right. He's going to be playing zone, and I think Todd Bowles knows exactly how he wants to use him.
Yeah, that's another thing. Todd Bowles being there for that defense, he kind of knows already that he knows what he's got to do.
Right. And it's not just the Rams that they're worried about, because they're looking at the quarterbacks. Now you got to go through Aaron Rodgers. You got to Matt Stafford, Russell, Kyler. It's like the list goes on and on, you know, in the NFC. So they're like, we've got to figure out a way to stop these other offenses from outscoring us.
Yeah, and they also kept Sherman away from some other teams who were looking into him. The 49ers were interested in bringing him back. That's another team that's going to be competitive in the NFC.
Before they made the deal.
The Seahawks were looking into him, which is another team in the NFC who's going to be competitive. And the Panthers were actually interested in Richard Sherman as well before the C.J. Henderson deal. So the Buccaneers were able to take another player that 3 other competitive teams in the NFC wanted. I mean, obviously having Tom Brady there makes it easy to recruit guys. Richard Sherman came out and said something like, when Tom Brady calls you, you know if you decline, like, you're going to end up regretting it. So moving forward, we'll see how they do, but they'll be stupid to play man coverage majority of the time with Richard Sherman in the game. But I want to thank you guys for joining. Thank you for being my guests again. And I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure you guys tune in to next week, and you can watch previous episodes as well. You can find our Instagram handles. We have Media, which is Media MPC on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as well, which is where you'll be catching the show. And then my @ is Pro Football Craze on Instagram. So make sure you guys check out that as well. And thanks for watching. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach.